Today we're going to take a look at power pole connectors. These are those connectors that you see on a lot of rigs today. They don't come with them usually. You buy them yourself and install them, and they give you a quick way to connect and disconnect the power from your rig. Now these things will handle a lot of current, and that's the reason that they're so popular. We're going to look at how you assemble one of these. There's two different parts to an Anderson power pole connector. First, there's the shell, and we've got those in black and red for negative and positive. And then there's a variety of different contact sizes. You can get a 15 or 30 amp connector that looks like this. The wire slips in the hole here in the end. Or you can go on up and get a larger one. This is a 45 amp connector here, and this has a slot in the back to install your wire in. Now the 15 amps will take 16 to 20 gauge wire, the 30 amps will take 12 to 16, and the 45 amps will take 10 through 14 gauge wire. We're going to use the 45 amps today because I'm making a power cable for a HF rig. These connectors will only plug in one direction. They won't fit in the other. So you can't get that part wrong, but you can get the polarity wrong. The first thing we should do is mate together the two shells here so that we know our polarity is going to be correct, and it's going to make the job easier later on. So I suggest you take the cable you'll be mating to and you orientate your shells in that direction and then put them together. Now to put them together, there's a little tab and a little notch on either connector here. What you do is you just slide them down like this to where they fit together snugly. If you want to, there's a little hole in the center here where you can put a tab through there to keep these from separating, but I haven't had a problem with that. Now let's just check and make sure our polarity is still correct, and it is. So we've got the shells ready to go. Now the next thing we'll need to do is prepare our wire here. So I'll begin by stripping the wire, and we'll cut the two back here a little bit. That should be plenty. And now we'll strip off some of the insulation, and we want to strip off just enough to fit inside the connector here, so about that much. Now there are wire strippers that you can use. I generally like to cut my insulation though with a knife, so that's what I'm going to do. And you want to be careful that you don't nick any of the wires inside of there as you're doing this. You just want to cut through the jacket on the outside. So I'll score the wire first, and then I'll take my strippers and pull it off. And now let's see if we're the right length, and that's just right. So let's do the other one. And let's check it. A little bit longer than the first one, but still that's a good length right there. I'm not sure what gauge this wire is. I think it's a 10 gauge. Here's one of the 15 amp connectors. We can see that all those conductors won't fit inside the hole there. So we know we can't use that. And besides, this is going on an HF rig, and we're going to have a 20 amp supply to it. So we want a connector that'll handle more than 20 amps. So I'm going to go with the 45 amp ones here. And now there's two different ways that we can go now. We can solder this in here, or we can crimp it, or actually three ways. We can do both if we want to. So let's try crimping the red one first. Now we want to get these lined up correctly. If you look inside the connector here, there's some metal springs in the bottom. When we put the pins in there, the hook here at the end of the pin is going to slide up over the metal spring in here. So we'll want to arrange them in that direction. It's easier if we go ahead and put these pins on where they'll be in the right direction, and we don't have to try to twist the wire later. So let's try crimping that and see if that works. Now your crimp tool is going to have a lot to do with how successful you are. This is the one I'm using here. I'm not sure if it's the exact one that you need, but it's what I've got. So we're going to try it. Now the whole point is that you want this to be kind of round when you're finished. So we're going to try to crimp it, and we may have to move our crimping tool around as we go to get everything straight. Now you notice I've got the rounded side of my tool here on the 2 open ends, and I've got the tab on the back there. And I got all but 1 strand in there. It didn't quite go. Now that feels like it's on there good, but I'm going ahead and do a little soldering on here as well, just to be sure. And we got to be careful. We don't want solder getting on the outside of the connector here, or we're going to have a problem sliding it up into the shell. Now, what's the first thing I'm going to do when I solder this? I'm going to put on a little bit of flux. You see me do that quite often, and that's because I want this to solder as quickly as possible. I don't want this connector and the insulation on the wire here getting hotter than necessary. Now, I probably should use a little bigger tip for this, but we'll try with this one that's on here. And it's beginning to flow. And we want it to flow on down in there on the wire inside the crimp. We don't want a lot left on the outside of the connector here. Just got a little there I didn't intend to. Okay, I believe that's good. Now I'll use a little denatured alcohol to clear the excess flux off of there. If this had been the lower amp connector where the pin had the complete circle around it, I may not have soldered it, but since this was a split type, I wanted to be sure that we had enough strength here. And that looks good, and we didn't melt the insulation back too far either. Now let's do the red one. Now if you look closely, you may see a little problem here. And that is, I dribbled a little bit of the solder on the connector when I was putting it together, so I'm going to take a razor blade and try to trim that down without scraping the plate off the connector. Easier said than done, but I think I've got it down to where it's flat again now. Now that we've got those crimped and soldered, let's do the final part of the equation here. The first thing we need to do is just look and see if these connectors are round back here where the wire's soldered, and they're not. They're kind of flat. They're a little bit wider than the body of the connector here is going to allow. So I'm going to take my crimpers and try to round them just a little bit. Now that should fit. The next thing we need to do is to make sure that they're straight here. If they're bent too much, they're not going to go up in there. So let's try it. Make sure we got the black wire going in the black connector here and the red going into the red, and the hook here on the end goes down toward the spring. Now after much groaning and gnashing of teeth, I finally got it in there. This is not easy on this larger gauge of wire right here. What I ended up doing is I had to trim back a little bit of the insulation here to about where it just barely goes up in there. And it was still so tight, the way that I got it in there was took a screwdriver, a small one, and poked around the sides here until I touched the top of that pin in there and pressed it on through. But there, we've got a good connector now. You may notice one problem here, and that's when I had this thing in the helping hands. The alligator clips kind of melted through the wire there. It got so hot when I was soldering it. Now there's no chance that these two are going to touch each other, but I'll slide a little piece of heat shrink tubing up there just so it doesn't bump anything in the vicinity. And let's see if they fit together now. A perfect match. There again, be sure about your polarity. You don't want to get that off.
Okay, we're going to talk about power poles.
Okay.
So what I was saying was that you can align them multiple ways. We were looking at that. Should I put the close-up camera on there?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
They can be aligned. They can be aligned vertically like that. They can be, and I've never seen anybody do that. You always see them aligned horizontally, but they can be two orientations, one like this
You got to watch your monitor because you're getting out of camera range there. You're limited.
One like this.
Yep.
Now,
What you can do once you've set things up like that is you can stack them using the slots and grooves on the top of what becomes the top and bottom. Right. And I believe somewhere in front of you, if you look around for it, you'll see a set of power poles that I've cobbled together that are stacked.
Well, they're not stacked though.
That's not it.
They can be stacked.
Yep, you're still out of frame. Watch your framing there. You're going to have to manipulate things while looking to your left. Yeah, that would be the way they could be stacked. So you could do that. Not a good reason to do that, but you can still attach individual connections to it, even though they're stuck together like that, as a fixed group. And that works pretty well.
I've got them quite tight now.
Yep.
Okay.
Sort of a problem.
Yeah.
One of the issues with power poles is sometimes they're too loose, sometimes they're too tight. So you got to find the Goldilocks combination. Sometimes I play with several. All right. So going back to holding up two of them together.
Okay.
In the horizontal configuration, and now swap them.
Well, let me just put another pair together, the other orientation.
Okay.
And you can see what happens when you try to mate them. Now, these are genderless connectors. You know what I mean by genderless?
That's the other thing that George didn't mention is that you can have them on either end of the wire, and it doesn't matter. You don't have male, you don't have female. They will connect together in any configuration.
Yeah. So. I thought they were called genderless because connectors are named after their inventor, and these were invented by Fred Genderless.
You got that, exactly.
Okay.
So show what the problem is.
When we have them like this and you connect them, you see the problem immediately. We got red to black and black to red. Can't have that. Just by swapping one pair, like so. There we go.
It should be easy to do. It's not really easy to do.
They're a little fiddly. Now, when you connect them up, you can see.
Yeah.
You can see what you get.
And the very first time I encountered a situation where I was going to take advantage of the idea that we were all compatible and I was going to use someone else's power supply or car or something with my radio.
It was different.
They did it differently.
50-50 chance. Yeah.
It is. Why is it that whenever there's a 50-50 chance of things being right, 9 times out of 10, they're wrong?
I don't know. I'm sure there's a rule for that. It's a Murphy thing, maybe.
How do you decide which way to do it? I'm going to put your little camera up there again. How do you decide?
I scoured the web looking for information concerning the polarity of Anderson power poles, and what I found is that this is the most common arrangement. When viewed with the large part of the connector at the top, red is on the right. Also, when viewed from the wires, this is the direction the wires would come from. The other connectors would come in from this side. So, let me go ahead and put this pair together.
And the little mnemonic, sort of, not really mnemonic, but the phrase that I memorized for figuring out how to do it is red right, A up. And if you look very carefully, there's a little A embossed on each one. Yeah. And that's a good shot. You can see it even with that reflection. With the A up, the red should be on the right.
When viewed from the connector end, not the wire end.
You can't see the A from the wire end. You have to be able to see the A.
Oh, when you can see the A. Okay.
When it's staring you in the face, looking you in the eye.
Okay. All right, good.
As if the camera's eyes were yours. You can see the A. It should be up, and the red should be to the right.
Cool.
How did that become the standard?
I don't know. How did it get to be that way?
I have no idea.
I don't either.
I did the same thing you did. I scoured the web until I found what people were doing, and evidently, and I'm guessing there's more than one ham out there who has put them together in random fashion.
Who claims to be the authority on
Well, that could be too. If we had scoured the web just a little bit harder, we might have found some people who are claiming the other way is the right way.
Yeah, right.
To achieve the goal of everybody being compatible, it has to be decided one way, and that is it. I don't care what you think. That is it.
I agree.
Okay, so red right, A up.
Yep.
The other thing that George had trouble with was jamming wires into the connector. He decided to solder them and then had a hard time pushing them in. But he did show that there were several different sizes of a little spade lug. So yeah, and you can see them there. One is for wire that is, I think, 15, 18 gauge, somewhere in there, and one is for a little bit bigger. They call it 15 amp and 30 amp. But is the spade lug a different size, or are they the same size?
No, the blades are the same size.
Okay, so they'll carry about the same amount of current, and they do make one that is a little bit bigger. And I don't have a sample of that. The only wires that I've ever had that needed the bigger connector are the ones on the really heavy duty radios, the HF rigs. And all I did, if you can hold it up there, you'll see that the 30 amp one is split. There's a little split down the collar. Still got that camera up a little bit too bright. I just stuck a screwdriver in there and opened the split up a little bit, and everything got in there. I'm not sure 100%, but they call that the 45 amp is the bigger one. I think that the blade terminal might be a little bigger on the 45 amp, but nothing I've got is over 30 amps.
Yeah,
it's just the wire is a little bit bigger.
I think it is. The slot in the crimper looks wider.
Stick that.
Yeah. The crimper is sized for 15 amp, 30 amp, and the 45 amp, and the part where the blade goes in is wider for the 45. So I think you must be right. I've never worked with the 45 amp ones.
Yeah,
I can get 10 gauge in these 30 amp.
it'll still go in into the same connectors, although they do have bigger connectors for bigger jobs. So since the radios don't draw 30 amps, unless maybe an amplifier or something would, but the radios, the 800 watt HF rigs don't draw 30 amps.
No, 20.
So the 30 amp connector is fine. It's just that the 12 gauge wire that they've got on it won't fit in it unless you split that little collar open a little bit. And the other thing that the George, he didn't have this fancy crimper. Show that fancy crimper again.
The West Mountain radio crimper. And to be honest with you, I've used better crimpers than this one.
Really?
Yeah,
but
I've
not
got
designed,
some at work.
Not designed for a power pole. It's just other crimp duty?
Just other pin crimpers that are generic standard pin crimpers that I've got from various places. I use them at work all the time.
Okay, so go ahead and stick that under the close-up camera.
Okay.
To me, that works pretty well. And George was using sort of a generic crimper. He got a crimp, but he wasn't real happy with it, so he soldered his connections. I've been completely satisfied with the crimp that I get. I cannot pull things off.
Yeah.
So it's a very tight crimp. And it has a ratchet release just in case you go wrong. You start getting things wrong, you can back it off. So it's well designed. I forget what it cost. It was in the neighborhood of $45 or so.
Yeah, about $50, I think.
Yeah, so it's not a cheap tool, and it only does that one thing. You can't crimp other stuff with it.
Yeah, and it does have an adjustment for the amount of crimp you get. Right here, you can loosen the Phillips head screw and then rotate the ring around, and that's just how far it's going to go before it stops. Before the ratchet opens.
Okay, so. George, you missed a couple things, but if people were keeping score and looking at the stuff that we miss, it's all over the place.
Did you want to demonstrate this crimper?
You want to try that?
Sure.
Because it's a little wonky, but sure, give it a try. You got
it's
some
a little
wire.
fiddly, but not too bad. Yeah, I got some wire here, some pins. What you want to do is
watch your framing there. You get off the top.
You just want to put the pin in the crimper, and notice how that blade is off to one side of the ferrule where you're going to crimp. You want that part down. and then just stick the wire in.
Yep. Now, George, one thing George did get, and you're actually using the wrong size blade, because you got a 30 amp blade, and that piece of wire will fit into the 15 better than it will the 30.
Yep. Yeah, what you gave me was two 30 amp blades and two 15 amp blades.
Yeah, but okay.
And one piece of wire.
All right. But before you crimp the other side, even before you crimp the first one of the things Georgia really did right was he showed that you need to line things up so that the blade will be oriented properly to go into the shell. Because you don't want to have to be twisting them around, and they only go into the shell one way.
Let me do the crimp, and then I'll show how it happened. Okay. Because I'm going to put this one.
You had a plan.
Yeah.
Whoop.
Oh, I got terrible tendonitis. Okay, I'm just going to switch hands here so I can...
So it's not too late? You haven't squashed it too much yet?
No. Okay.
It is hard. That crimper is hard to close all the way.
Yeah, it doesn't have a lot of leverage there. Okay, let me go ahead and assemble the connectors. A up, red on the right. Now, I don't know. Yeah, you can see the little wire spring inside there. The bottom of this pin is going to hook over that wire spring, so it needs to be orientated this direction. When you crimp the pins on the wire, you want them so that when you slide them in, they're in this orientation so that the hook can snap over the wire. If they were, well, the wires will be reversed now, but if you had crimped them so the wires were correct with the pins this way, you would have to twist them around, and that just weakens everything.
Okay.
So with it this way.
Now here you're going to reach the point where I have the most trouble, and that is getting them pushed all the way in, and there should be a little click. In fact, now that you can't see it anymore, bring it up by your microphone so we can hear the click.
All right, here we go. First one side. And it didn't click. It's right at the edge, but it didn't click. Let me get the other side most of the way in there.
I'm hearing your knuckles click more than the...
Yeah, they're getting really old. I had a birthday since I saw you last, I think. Okay, let me push the black one in.
See, a lot of times I can't get them just pushing the wire. I can't get them to click in and be locked.
You have to reach in there with something and push the pin.
Yep.
Yeah.
A little screwdriver usually.
Yep.
And George was having that trouble too.
Yeah, and I might have to do the same thing here.
Can you get yourself back under the camera?
See, I've already got a good kink on that connection there.
Yeah.
And it would have been better if that hadn't happened like that.
Yep. So that's the trouble I have, and evidently that's sort of a generic problem because that may be too big a screwdriver. Maybe not.
Come on.
I'll also set things. Did it click in?
No, it didn't.
Yeah. So I also set things so that if my screwdriver slips, I'm not going to shove it through the palm of my hand.
Oh, yeah. That ever since that Hurricane Fran incident.
Yeah. That's it. It's in there now. And you should be able to tug on those wires.
The black one did not click in. So let me get it up here and push. There she goes.
Okay. Well, we heard that click loud and clear. Yeah. That was the click.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to your close-up camera.
Yeah.
And, yeah, you should be able to tug on those wires. And if you just tug on the bundle together, you might not be stressing one of them. So you want to make sure you try them both together.
Yeah. Okay. And then for the 15 amp. Just going to drop the pin in. The little thing there that sets the depth doesn't work near as well in the 15 amp. The pin
you're off the frame again. So
okay, the pin actually goes in too far.
When you do the next one, I'm going to go to your wide shot so everyone can see how much effort you have to put into to closing that crimper. Sometimes I'll put one handle on the desk and just push with both hands.
Okay. Now I'm trying to pay attention to the orientation of the pins, you know, so they won't have to be twisted. There we go.
Well, you're still kind of out of frame, but I think we got the idea.
Oh, jeez.
We need cameramen.
Yeah, you're going to fire me. All right. Let's just...
Okay, are you under the close-up camera there? There we go. So for that narrow wire, what gauge is that wire?
18, right.
Okay, yeah. So the 15 amp is a better fit.
Right.
Although the crimper crimped okay. It crimped down on the using the 30 amp
right. Yeah,
spade.
You can't pull the wire back out of it.
I keep switching to me when I mean to be switching to you. I'm going to have to stop criticizing Cliff for doing that. Are you back under the close-up? There you go.
Yeah, but you know what's going on here. The red one is good, and so is the black one. Yeah, they're in there.
Okay. And so just for fun, connect them together.
Oh, you've got
and this is what is known as a phase-locked loop. Oh, yeah, there's an extra little feebob there that you can show people.
I'm going to put a twist in it here. Just because that's the kind of guy I am there. There, now it's twisted.
That's for lightning protection.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and you've got a little keeper here.
Yeah, show how easy it is to pull them apart.
Oh.
First. Yeah, so you can get a situation where you're out of frame again. You can get a situation where the things that you're connecting together for power can have a little tension on the wire. You probably shouldn't. That wouldn't be a good idea, but it can happen. And in some cases, under a seat or something, could be hard to reach, hard to see that that's what went on. So you can buy these little plastic feebobs that will go in to
It's a feebob?
Yeah. That will go in there and hold things together. And that'll snap in with a little bit of tension, I think.
And it's easy to pull that out, but you can't pull the connector apart while that's in there.
Yep.